Thank you, Susan Batten, Taylor, and your team at the Association of Black Foundation Executives, Edward, Takesha, and others. And thank you to the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation for organizing this event at CBC. It is my privilege to introduce this panel discussion titled Impact of the Pandemic on Building Economic Power in Black Communities Through Business and Entrepreneurship. The audience is in for a treat, as you will hear from experts and critical thinkers on the topic of business and entrepreneurship. We've hosted a number of panels over the years with AFI, and they never disappoint. My name is Ted Archer, and I had global efforts supporting small business expansion at JPMorgan Chase Foundation. Our initiative, Small Business Forward, focuses intentionally, and has for years, on unlocking opportunities for marginalized business owners, but in particular, entrepreneurs of color, where the gaps are widest and the opportunity for impact is greatest. It's in this continual search for impact that we've been sharpening our model for collective action that brings to bear the strengths of our firm with research, policy, community partnership, and philanthropy, and the expertise of these community partners to tackle a number of the drivers of economic opportunity, including housing, financial health, business ownership, and job creation. Zooming in on business ownership for a moment, while we know it is a proven vehicle for wealth generation in the Black community, we also know that Black-owned businesses skew smaller and are underrepresented among businesses with employees. Relatedly, Black-led and Black-serving organizations most proximate to Black-owned businesses are themselves underinvested in and face challenges when it comes to economic security and weathering financial shocks. Black wealth itself is on a downward trend by 2053 to be zero, only exacerbating the disparity which acts as a drag on our economy. Yet this disparity reveals an opportunity and a call to action. For example, if people of color owned businesses at the same rate as white counterparts, we would have 1 million more businesses, 10 million more jobs, and over 300 billion in more income. And also, for example, if minority depository institutions and community development financial institutions who already do more with less and access more resources if they had at their disposal, could support more and more businesses in the long term and contribute to catalytic viability of underserved communities. Many banks, including Chase, have financial relationships with community partners, but I'm proud to say that JPMorgan Chase has been partnering with Black-led and Black-serving organizations around the country in meaningful ways over the years beyond transactions. Along with other financial institutions and corporations, however, we will need to partner and create new models and incentives, as well as build on existing best practices to further enable the broader ecosystem of financial institutions and Black-led organizations. I'll share just a few quick examples of what has worked. 5 years ago, we launched an Entrepreneurs of Color initiative that in particular exemplifies the innovative power of partnering with MDIs and CDFIs to lead the way. Over the last 5 years, we've joined up with other banks and investors and 13 CDFIs across the US to produce $50 million in lending for over 500 businesses in Black and brown communities with less than a 2% default rate pre-COVID. 3 years ago, we embarked on a research initiative with the National Bankers Association, the Milken Institute, and the Rockefeller Foundation, laying out original research on the landscape of MDIs and how these efficient organizations are doing more with less. This research underpins much of what we understand today about the potential of MDIs as a sector. This past year, JPMorgan Chase announced participation in the Department of Treasury's Mentor Protege program with 2 MDI banks. And we are taking the lead in developing this public-private partnership as a blueprint for how MDIs and large banks should comprehensively engage to scale and improve our banking system. It remains incredibly important to continue to name this problem, which is why we will build on a multi-billion-dollar investment practice already made available through existing efforts like advancing Black pathways, financing affordable housing in hard-hit cities, and also supporting minority-owned businesses through the Entrepreneurs of Color Fund. Now more than ever, we recognize the importance of preserving the gains our communities have made since the last recession and over the last decade as the world awakens to the growing disparity laid bare by COVID-19 and social activism. But we don't just want communities to recover to a status quo that was precarious to begin with. We want to design and build a more sustainable future. Black-led institutions and philanthropy in particular have a unique and strategic role to play in generating economic opportunity in the nation's most distressed communities, and expanding their reach with collective action will bring new sources of capital into communities that lack access to financing. This is why it's critical for each of us and each organization to understand our role in the ecosystem, and joining efforts with community partners is so important. As the landscape for small businesses has been transformed tremendously by COVID-19, so has the landscape for the institutions that provide the vital resources in communities of color. To solve this systemic problem, it will take a long-term commitment from institutions like JPMorgan Chase, our government officials, and leaders like those represented on this panel today. And look, we need to all be in this for the long haul. For real transformation to take place, corporations need to make racial equity and economic justice permanent fixtures that will enable the sustainability of institutions that are the backbones of the Black community and underserved communities. Now, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to one of the great leaders of JPMorgan Chase and the moderator of this panel, my colleague, SEKOU KAALUND.
Thank you, Ted. I'm glad to be here for this important conversation on building Black businesses and growing Black wealth. So let's dive right in. As Ted said, we have an all-star impact panel. So I'll quickly cover our panelists, including Ron Busby, the president and CEO of the U.S. Black Chambers, Inc. Donna Gambrell, the president and CEO of Appalachian Community Capital. And Chris Wheat, managing director, JPMorgan Chase Institute and director of business research. So Chris, we're going to start with you. COVID-19 pandemic has clearly had an impact on all small businesses, but in particular, Black businesses. So can you tell us what the data says about the impact these businesses are having in this economic slowdown?
Sure, and thanks for the question and thanks for the opportunity to talk about this. I think to understand what's happening with Black-owned businesses in the time of COVID, you really need to go back to what the state of play was for Black-owned businesses before, because it really kind of sets up the scene. As Ted suggested before, Black-owned businesses are a lot smaller. They are definitely less likely to have employees, and they run on a much thinner cash buffer. They tend to have much less cash liquidity. So we had done research over the past couple of years to understand some of these differences in financial outcomes and financial state of being for Black-owned businesses. Really having this wonderful opportunity to look at this huge de-identified data that we are able to use at the Institute. And in looking at that data, we could see, 2013, 2014, 2015, all the way through, the years leading up to the current moment, that Black-owned businesses, only have less than 2 weeks of cash on hand. The revenues tend to be, for the typical business, maybe 40% of the revenues for a similar white-owned business, controlling for lots of things. And that's just table stakes. That's kind of the situation before things turned this past March. Importantly, again, even in that time leading up to the current moment, Black-owned businesses were all equal, more likely to go out of business, to close those accounts and to stop operating. But we did see that if you kind of compared pound for pound businesses that had similar cash liquidity, similar sales, that a lot of those exit differences went away. And so this was the context that we walked into when we started getting those inbound calls in March, like, what do you think is going to happen? And we had a lot of concern to see how things are going to play out, because we knew that the very things that were critically missing sometimes, that cash liquidity, the capital access, access to markets, weren't in place and were going to really be the issue. And we've seen that, as shelter-in-place measures went into place, we saw revenues falling through the floor across the board, as you suggest, SEKOU, for all kinds of businesses, but particularly Black-owned businesses. We saw cash balances dropping, by a quarter for Black-owned businesses, much more than we saw for white-owned, Hispanic-owned businesses as well. And so, that's what things look like as the first weeks and months rolled out. And it's really a pretty challenging situation for businesses to figure out, like, what do they need to do to keep the door open. It's true that all, to the extent that they can, all businesses will cut back their expenses to manage the cash as best as they can, but starting from that lower place. And others have seen at least the temporary closure rates being particularly high for Black-owned businesses. We really want to understand how that's going to play out in terms of their ability to withstand the crisis and hopefully have enough assets in place to rebuild as things, again, hopefully turn around.
So to recap, Black businesses were starting with less, got
Right.
impacted more, and as a result, we've seen greater closures, which is unfortunate. So let me pivot to Donna. Can you explain the role of CDFIs and particularly what they can do to support some of these minority small businesses as they work to recover from this crisis?
Thank you for the question, SEKOU, and it's a pleasure to be here, pleasure to be on the panel with such distinguished colleagues. You know, the CDFI industry was really born out of the civil rights movement. It was created in many ways to address the discrimination and certainly some of the exclusion that we saw among our most underserved communities, including minority communities. And when you see the growth of the CDFI industry over the last 20, 30, 40 years, what you see is a group of organizations, mostly nonprofit, that have really worked hard to deliver social, economic, political justice to those communities that have been so disenfranchised historically. So these CDFIs can be banks, they can be credit unions, they can be loan funds, but they all have the same mission, and that is to serve underserved markets, to make sure that they're supporting those populations in those communities that have been most affected by economic challenges, and they've done an extraordinary job. There are 1,100 CDFIs across the country. They're in every state of the union, including the District of Columbia, and they have been involved in all sectors, whether it's housing or community facilities, education, healthcare, and small businesses. And what those CDFIs have done in particular in the small business space is that they have worked with small business owners to finance those businesses, first of all. And when those businesses have hit some roadblocks, have worked hand in hand. And I think that's what sets them apart from many other organizations, that they really are working hand in hand with their customers and even those who are not their customers to kind of help them navigate through the storm, to work with them on pivoting their businesses, developing credible business plans, looking at additional resources, whether it's at a CDFI or some other resource to keep them going or to get them back on their feet. And oftentimes, almost all the time, CDFIs are offering loans that are affordable, low cost, very flexible in terms of the term itself of the loans, and again, are required, because they are certified by the U.S. Treasury Department, they are required to also provide, as part of that certification, development services. And that means training and technical assistance. So in addition to the financing piece, they're also working with those small business owners to make sure that they have the right business advisory services as well to keep their businesses afloat. This is a particularly tough time now. People say that it's unprecedented. It is and it isn't. I think we know in our community that we've been through tough times for a long time. And so I think the role of CDFIs is just even more critical today than ever before.
Well, thank you. And that was a helpful description of, again, the work and like you said, the criticality of CDFIs. But I know you also wear another hat as the chair of the African American Alliance of CDFI. So can you talk about, again, the goals for that organization and where there's intersection based on what you just covered?
Absolutely. So the Alliance was formed about 2 years ago, and we came together. This is a group of CDFI CEOs, African American, who really came together not only to network, but to look at ways in which we could lean on each other for knowledge and expertise, but also look at ways in which we could obtain additional resources to build our organizations. Because what we were finding, SEKOU, is that our customers were facing, we were facing some of the same challenges that our customers were. Lack of access to affordable financing, lack of resources, not always having the same relationships as our majority-led CDFIs to open up doors to get more abundant resources. And I must say with Ted here, I want to just give a shout out to JP Morgan Chase, because Ted was one of the first folks that came to us and said, listen, how can we help this network? How can we get you started? How can we help with building the infrastructure? And Chase provided our first grant to this network of 37 loan funds, really to help us build the infrastructure. So what we're focused on now, and again, that was 2 years ago, we signed a memorandum of understanding in 2019. And what we're focused on in particular is closing the wealth gap in the African-American community. That's a big goal, but I think you've got the right people at the table to do that, because these are folks that have been in the business for decades, working in their communities. And that is certainly going to be not only our overarching goal, but we also, of course, want to make sure that those organizations are building their capacity, that the leadership is being developed, and ultimately that the communities that we serve are being supported in a way that makes sense and certainly provides growth for the communities and the populations as well.
And that's a great reminder that we are all needed in our seats, whether it's private sector, philanthropy, business advisory group, CDFIs, and it's us working collaboratively that will enable us to move the needle. And speaking of business advisory services or organizations, I want to go to you, Ron, next. Obviously, as CEO of the Black Chamber, you really have insight into Black entrepreneurs as well. And so as we think about supporting Black entrepreneurs, can you talk to us about the resources that are out there for business owners?
Thank you so much, SEKOU. And let me also thank Chris for what he has presented, not only this evening, but what JP Morgan Chase has accumulated, which is data. To me, data is so important as we are talking about policy, as we are talking about disparities. It really has in the past been an emotional conversation about what we have felt is happening in our communities. But because of the research and the data that we have, now we can really prove what is going on in our communities, and more importantly, we can talk about solutions. And so at the U.S. Black Chamber, we represent 145 chambers and 332,000 Black-owned businesses. And many of them are saying the same things. One, the payroll protection plan was not created with Black businesses in mind. And so when we look going forward, it's got to be policy first. We've got to make sure that we have good policy being created that includes all of us. Secondly, we can no longer let someone from outside of our community paint a broad brush of who we are. This is no longer about diversity and inclusion for all minority businesses. This is a moment in time that is designated for a Black Lives Matter movement, which means that now that we have real data, the communities across the country are seeing that the disparities and the discrimination for Black people is unique, and we have unique challenges. We need to come with unique solutions. And first off, it needs to be about Black-owned businesses. And so part of the resources that the U.S. Black Chamber has, along with the policy conversation, along with access to credit in our relationship with JP Morgan Chase, it really is about contracting, as well as entrepreneurial training, technical assistance, and relationships. So I would ask those that are listening to make sure that they go to the U.S. Black Chamber's website, because we are putting out information daily. What I was really challenged with is our communities that suffered the most were impacted the greatest, got the least amount of education and information, so that now that you see our communities being hampered the most. During this period of time, we lost nearly 500,000 Black-owned businesses that employ Black people. A lot of folk have been talking about, well, Black businesses don't really hire. So of the 2.6 million Black firms that you own and operate, you don't have many employees. True, but we have 1099s, we have subcontractors, we have family members, we have businesses that pay in cash, but because of the fact that they didn't have a lot of the information early on, they weren't able to take advantage of $530 trillion of stimulus that was taxpayer money. Many of it coming from our communities that was dispersed, that we had no opportunity to participate in. And so I would secondly tell the Black-owned businesses that are 51% owned or more to make sure that you onboard your business there, byblack.us. The reason that's important is because right now, if you're a Black-owned firm and I'm going to corporate America or I'm going to government and I say, increase your supplier spend with Black firms, they can't do it. Because right now we are all certified as minority women entrepreneurs. I'm not a minority, I'm Black. I'm not a woman. And many times we are not small businesses. We have unique challenges with unique opportunities. And so we need to make sure that we are coming up with unique solutions. And you can start by going to the U.S. Black Chamber to find out many of those resources and opportunities for you.
Ron, you make a great point. As you think about the role Black business owners have played, way before I could have been working at a bank, there were Black businesses that hired in the Black community and really were that growth engine. And that's why Black business owners have 12 times the net worth of Black non-business owners. So we know how critical these businesses are in the community, and the numbers you share are disheartening when you think about the losses of Black businesses. So it's important that whether it's U.S. Black Chambers or all of these organizations, that the information is certainly out there. So what I want to do too, I just want to stay with you for 1 second. Like, can you give us other specific advice that you would give to these business owners in this time that will help them, recover from the challenges, or at least be aware of, outside of the website, where they should go to really understand how to get the information that will help them navigate?
Well, my mother's a minister, and she always would say, the glass is overflowing. I look at this as an opportunity for Black-owned businesses. Yes, we lost 441,000 firms, but they all had customers. They had vendors. They had employees. They were selling products and services. We have to make sure that those business opportunities don't leave our communities. We have got to gather together to do joint ventures, to do partnerships, and most importantly, where it makes sense, acquisitions and mergers. And so I'm telling our folk, the first thing they need to go do is to go have a great banking relationships. It's not about getting a check. It's not about having a transaction, but the bank needs to understand my long-term vision as well. And so the next pandemic, because it is going to come, if it's a cybersecurity war, if it's another flu or virus, we need to prepare ourselves and always be looking for growth opportunities. And that starts and ends with a good financial relationship, because you are the individuals that allow us to grow. We know that Black businesses hire Black people. And so for us to have a healthy community, we need healthy businesses. And so it really begins with us understanding the value of good partners, especially banking partners.
Yeah, again, great comments. And Don, I'm going to come back to you just because, Ron emphasized the importance of community, and Appalachia is not really seen as having much racial diversity. So can you help us, at least debunk this myth and talk about what Appalachia Community Capital is doing to really support minority small businesses? And then just if you would answer the same thing more broadly, what insights or calls to action would you leave for Black business owners right now?
Well, SEKOU, the first question that people ask me so often when they meet me is, are there Black and brown people in Appalachia? And I have to say yes, because when you think of Appalachia and the states that it covers, of course there are. And we're in everywhere. We're in all communities. So the Appalachian region covers all of West Virginia, and then portions of 12 other states, starting with the bottom tip of New York, going all the way down to the top tip of Mississippi. And then when you think about all those other states in between, of course there are Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, the Carolinas, Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi. While it is true in the Appalachian region, you do not have the same level of diversity that you might have in urban markets. There is diversity there, and you do have Black small business owners in Appalachia as well. My CDFI, Appalachian Community Capital, is a CDFI lending intermediary, which means that we have members who I raise capital for, lend it to them, and they turn around and lend those dollars to small business owners in the region, including minority-owned businesses. So when I look at, even during this latest pandemic, I look at the work that those CDFIs in the region are doing and the Black businesses that they're supporting. I look at, for example, the woman in Georgia who, through the work of that CDFI, helped finance an elder care facility. A person in North Carolina who was actually rebuilding a cafe in the part of town where Black people used to frequent decades ago and wanted to bring that back. I see certainly tech businesses that are being run by Black small business owners as well. And so certainly see the importance of those CDFIs supporting those businesses. It becomes really critical to understand that even in a region like Appalachia, you do have that diversity as well. And you do have good CDFIs there who are supporting those businesses and really understand the importance of looking at the entire community and being very inclusive and being very purposeful in the lending activity that they're doing. And I think that's critical for any sort of successful CDFI.
Thank you for that. And I would be remiss if I didn't highlight another resource for Black entrepreneurs. Ron, you played a critical role in Advancing Black Pathways and us launching Advancing Black Entrepreneurs, a coalition including U.S. Black Chambers, National Urban League, and others. And so that is a resource as well that you can see on the Advancing Black Pathways website or the Chamber's website. And so there, Ron, thank you, publicly for all the work you're doing around that advocacy as we try to work with these businesses to help them survive, revive, and then thrive in this challenging period. But Chris, any other insights that you would share from a data perspective or to close us out from your perspective?
Sure. I mean, I think that the easiest thing to say from our point of view, we spend a lot of time thinking about how businesses manage cash and their liquidity would be, pay attention to your finances, pay attention to your income statement. In practice, though, what does that mean, right? Like I would be, many business owners of all stripes are not necessarily running a business because they love accounting. Like a lot of people run their business because they love the product or the service they deliver. So I don't know that really differs that much from a Black business owner to a white business owner to anybody else. When I looked around to see what was happening in my community and the small businesses that I know and observe, sometimes managing your cash meant finding like innovative ways to make sure you're still able to connect with your customers or innovative ways to manage your expenses. And so there, it goes right back to the very things that Ron and Donna have been saying, and even you just said, right? It's staying connected to your network. It's making sure that you have developed a good relationship with other businesses in your area or other people you know who aren't in your area who run a business. Working, if you're working with a CDFI, to get that sort of trusted guidance and assistance to think about these kind of questions. Making sure that you're connected to your local Black chamber, or taking advantage of programs like Advancing Black Entrepreneurs and others. But the point is, like, I don't want the recommendation to stop at, make sure you don't manage your finances poorly, because it's the how of that is very much in a moment like this when so many things are changing, is staying abreast of how, like, what do you need to do tactically to survive and continue to build your business. And I feel like we can all think of businesses that we know and love that maybe missed a beat on finding a way to do curbside delivery or hadn't really made the investment in, finding way to get the menu online or to be thoughtful about how do you do dry cleaning, in a world where nobody really wants to come into your shop. So if you're the business owner, if you are a person in supporting the business, really sort of driving those connections and supporting those networks, I think continues to be critical. We still have lots of businesses that haven't closed yet, that are struggling, that are trying to stay open. So it is not too late to try to make the kind of intervention that's about making sure those best practices are shared.
Yeah, it sounds like, what you're saying, there's an opportunity, whether we like it or not, but to innovate, and whether that's rethinking our supply chain, our payments, the resources that are available, we need to tap in. If you don't have the insight, go to your local Black chamber, but we have to take advantage of the insights, because based on what Donna said as well, that is a key piece for a lot of these Black business owners. You may be the sole proprietor, or you may have a small team, but your passion may be in whatever that business is, but these are some of the critical factors to help you navigate challenges of financial distress like the one we're in. So any other last comments before I close us out?
I don't want people to think that small business owners are the problem. We could get a government contract, which many Black firms have done extremely well through government programs. You could get a contract August 1st and may not get paid till January 15th. And that's got nothing to do with your accounting skills, with your business acumen. That is a program that is set up through the federal government for small businesses that are now mandated to go get credit, which we know in the Black community is difficult to get, extremely expensive. And so now I have to carry the federal government's float to provide a product or service. During the last administration, when we faced the recession, President Obama created and implemented the Prompt Pay Program, which stated if I got a contract August 1st, I could invoice you August 15th, I would get paid August 30th. That is good policy that allows a business owner to manage themselves off of cash flow versus now having to go and get a loan just to do a product or service for a federal government agency. I think that can be addressed immediately. It was discussed early on, wasn't implemented. And the last thing I want people to understand is there is an extreme direct connect between policy and your local business. And it's not just about voting once every 4 years. These are conversations that are being had literally daily that business owners need to make sure that their concerns are being addressed as well as heard and implemented so that when the next issue comes, that we at least have a voice at the table. Nowhere in the 700 plus pages of this documentation did you ever read the words Black or African American. We weren't included in that policy conversation, but we were definitely impacted by that policy as well as COVID-19.
And just as a real quick follow-up on what Ron said, I really appreciate the all solutions do not, or maybe most solutions don't sit on sort of changing the behavior of business owners. I think I guess that's what I was sort of trying to get at when I was noting that, business owners of all stripes have cash flow management challenges. And just to add to the list of entities that could do something different, in addition to federal agencies and federal policy, there's state and local policy. There's people in the supply chain that are other businesses in the private sector. So there's a role, there are many other actors that could do things to help besides sort of the individual actions of small business owners. And many of those people, I think are the people are in our conversation right now, or at least certainly in the sphere of influence. So yes, to the extent that we can help small business owners do things that are better, we should definitely do that. But there's a much broader set of levers that can be pulled.
I like that. We'll close on that thought, and that is that policy can be more effective when we're proximate to the issues that we're trying to solve. So in the example Ron gave in your research earlier, that Black business owners have 2 to 3 weeks of cash flow. So if you're talking about a government contract and you implement a policy that is solving for where the pain point is, then you can enable these businesses to scale and grow. So that's why I say at the beginning, this all comes together, and we need the brain trust. And we certainly heard that from you all. So I do want to thank all of you for your insights into this discussion. So, Chris, Donna, and Ron, and I want everyone out there to know that it is critical that we all do our part to help Black businesses in this moment of crisis. So please be intentional in your own decision-making and how you support Black businesses, because the economic health of our community depends on it. So now we'll take a break from finish the panel, and we'll have a word from Susan Taylor Batten, who's CEO and president of ABFE, and she'll close us out. So thank you again, panel. Really appreciated your comments and insights.
Thank you,
Susan?
Brad.
Yeah, thank you all. SEKOU, thank you for the moderation, and to the panelists for everything that you're doing. The work is critically important. And I love SEKOU. You said all of us have to play a part. And so we at AbbVie are trying to push another key actor, Chris, to your point, which is the field of philanthropy, really to step up and move in this important and critical time. So for those of us who don't know, those of you who don't know us, we are AbbVie. We are a philanthropic partnership for Black communities. We have a membership of about 800 around the country, predominantly Black staff, CEOs and trustees of foundations, the over 90,000 foundations in the US. And our mission is to promote effective and responsive philanthropy in Black communities. And we truly appreciate the partnership with JP Morgan Chase that we've had over the last couple of years. One of our key members who has led the way in terms of how foundations can invest in building Black businesses and scaling Black businesses. So many of you have been with us on this journey. You know that we've been doing a number of things over the last several years. One, we have organized meetings at the Council of Foundations, which is the big membership association of all foundations in this country. Two, we've been hosting at our conference, Harambe, our annual conference, plenaries and sessions on funder strategies to scale Black businesses, to build economic power in Black communities. And most recently, given the COVID emergency, we helped organize two relief funds for Black businesses in the US at two organizations, one at the Association for Enterprise Opportunity, or AEO, and the other at Prosperity Now, and then pulled together about 50 foundations to lift these funds up, give it more visibility, to try to resource relief to Black businesses in this critical moment. So we're in this work and we'll be in this work along with JP Morgan Chase. And I want to speak specifically to funders, those who are in our network around the importance of acting now, and leave you with just 4 sort of takeaways on a sort of a call to action, if you will. The first is that we're hoping that as many foundations as possible actually take the time to understand what foundations are doing in this area, to learn the lessons of the JP Morgans, other foundations that have been on this journey of scaling Black businesses. And you can do that by starting to do that by reading our report that's coming out. It will be up very soon, called Black Economic Power: Foundation Strategies to Support Black Businesses. And it includes a number of case studies, again, around funder commitment to scale Black businesses. JP Morgan Chase's work is summarized there through an interview with Ted Archer. We've got the work of the Annie E. Casey Foundation and their work to build Black businesses in Atlanta. The big bold goal they have that in 1,000 days, they're gonna support 1,000 Black businesses to hire at least one more person or to provide current staff with a living wage. Really interesting work happening in Atlanta. There's another case around from Allegheny Franciscan Ministries about their support to expand Black businesses in Florida, particularly in Miami and Fort Pierce. So first and foremost, we want funders and donors of all types to take the time to learn with their peers about the strategies, challenges, and leverage resources wherever possible. The second takeaway for funders at this point is that we hope that you take a look at AbbVie's call to action to address anti-Black racism. We published that call to action soon after the murder of George Floyd. It's been signed now by over 80 Black Foundation executives, and it includes 10 imperatives. One of them is to engage Black businesses in this moment. We think now is the time for foundations who are in fact economic engines. They are purchasers of goods and services in addition to employers. Now is the time for foundations to take the inventory of their vendors and their consultants, look at your procurement budgets, and double down on Black businesses. We have a number of foundations who are taking this up, looking to move money to Black banks, for example. So our message to funders right now is to buy Black in terms of goods and services and bank Black, to put your money in Black banks and Black financial institutions in our community, to go beyond the grant making and think about how you use those dollars as well. The third action item for funders is specific to Black investment firms, a certain kind of Black business. And we are really concerned at AFBI about the extent to which Black investment firms have been shut out of the opportunity to manage foundation endowments. Of the trillions of dollars under management of foundations in this country, less than 1% is actually by minority and women-owned firms. That's not just Black firms, that's minority and women-owned firms. Even though we do have data that suggests that Black firms perform just as well and sometimes outperform white firms, we also know they're very philanthropic. So we're really encouraging foundations in this moment to look at the investment side of the shop, so to speak, and think about engaging Black investment firms in managing foundation endowments. And then the last item that was spoken to today by Donna in particular, we are asking funders, donors of all types, to really think about strengthening the infrastructure, the Black-led infrastructure to build economic power in Black communities. That infrastructure includes Black-led CDFIs. That infrastructure includes Black banks. That infrastructure includes Black chambers of commerce, right? So we really want to take this time to ask funders to think about the ecosystem of building power in Black communities, economic power, and to use the resources accordingly. So we all have our marching orders. This panel was great for all of us. Again, I just close and say, buy Black, bank Black, and support the infrastructure for Black-led social change. On behalf of JP Morgan Chase, on behalf of ADFI and all the panelists, we want to thank you for spending time with us today and to stay safe. Take care.
Advancing Black Pathways is a program we launched to truly make targeted impact across education, careers, and wealth creation.
The apprentice program was life-changing for me, not having access and a network, especially as a Black man. ABP gave me that. I can call people right now and they'll answer my questions. They'll give me wisdom, and that's not something I've ever had before.
Everyone thought I was crazy. They were like, there's no beauty, there's no fashion in Detroit. And I was like, but there will be because I'm coming back home. We reached out to JP Morgan and they created the Entrepreneurs of Color Fund, and we were able to get a loan to help fund our target purchase order.
Talent is created equally, opportunity is not. And my hope is that we're doing our part by helping Black people succeed in whatever they wish to accomplish.